Permaculture, restore the land. Well, I got me a mulch garden, so the land it would not.
But you've got to read the whole manual to get it out. I've got the pages which are important for you. Would you like to see them? Yeah. There's something unique sitting in that manual. I often wonder whether to chuck it out or not, but I've left it in. It's the centrepiece, which has centrepiece of colour pages, has the periodic table on it, and it's heavily coded.
Excellent.
It's coded for the function of the elements in the organic world. It's not coded for the function of the elements in the chemical world, in the sense of inorganic chemistry. It's coded for their function in organic systems. Many of them, for instance, we think we can put on superphosphate, and we can, and get away with it a bit. But there are two reasons why in the end we can't keep on. The first is that all of that carries its own pollutants. The two very common ones are cadmium and uranium. So as you add superphosphate annually, so cadmium uptake increases in your plants to the point where many market gardens who are inorganic, the cadmium in it is way beyond health levels, and that goes for most of the vegetables you're buying. The cadmium levels are way beyond that, and that is a deadly poison, and it's an extraordinarily painful death. It's a screaming death. So constant application of superphosphate to food systems will kill you in the long run. The second one about the uranium, it is radioactive, and it builds up annually and remains in your soils, and it's another poisonous material. So although the benefits of phosphate are high on phosphate-lacking soils, the benefits of annual applications are zero. It actually becomes extremely detrimental. Now, most of American and modern Australian and European agriculture has reached those levels of pollution because there's no clean phosphate sources. There's no sources of phosphate which are just phosphate. It's always accompanied by. But the other thing that happens is phosphate blocks zinc uptake in plants and animals. Now, zinc at first may sound pretty slight to you. Look at zinc closely. Zinc is the coenzyme for almost all your food processing systems. So you can eat your head off, but you can't absorb your food without zinc. The other effect you might notice is wound healing slow or none, and sexual development is not. You don't develop testes, ovaries, penises, all that. So zinc is very important to the expression of sexuality, to the digestion of food, the absorption of your amino acids. It's a coenzyme with most of our enzymatic processes in our bodies. 25 milligrams. And you're lucky to get 8 milligrams a day from crops grown on superphosphate. So at the same time that superphosphate's adding cadmium, it's decreasing zinc. And the other thing it will do eventually is cause elevated copper levels in your blood. So if you have ultra-high copper levels, you're copper poisoned. It's because you're taking up that double plus ion in the absence of zinc. So it's indication much of the world's population now has high blood copper levels. It's particularly high in public servants for an interesting reason. They drink a lot of coffee out of these copper heated vessels. So fortunately there's an awful lot of public servants poison themselves sitting there drinking, out of these urns that keep on boiling. There's very high copper levels. The other place you expect to find copper levels, high, at sublethal levels, is in desert populations, where zinc uptake's blocked by the high alkalinity. So there's another problem, two problems for you. The fact that a lot of our vegetables are poisoned with cadmium is on the secret list. It's totally suppressed in Australia and Britain by a government D notice. Because effectively, there's very little food left that is safe to eat. So the reason why you don't want anybody to know is, you know, if they die quietly of something, that's okay. If everybody starts to reject the food because it's cadmium poison, that's a disaster. Because who supported and actually, in America, for instance, pays 80-something billion a year towards the cost of those things? Your government. Yeah. The direct and indirect subsidies for agriculture, and particularly for artificials, is worldwide through governments. Because it's logical, because who in the hell pays for governments to get elected? And as you know, well, it was on the news yesterday and today, it costs you 70 million to get somebody in now, in the Republican Party at least, and 30 million to get someone in the other side. But nobody's paying the other side anymore much. But a lot of people are paying the Republican Party. And who you pay works for you. So you're not going to see any decrease in the subsidies either to agricultural colleges or to agriculture. And you're not going to see any freedom of information. And the only way to know is to go to NutriClean, which is an independent testing authority, and send your vegetables there and see if you can eat them or not. And mostly you can't. The last information I had from them was they'd found 2 organic carrots on sale in America, and they wanted to know whether they took them a week or 2, they tracked them back. It's a bloke growing them in his backyard up in Colorado. But there's no organic carrots grown, you know, in America on the broad scale. So what you're doing and what you never intended to do, and make sure of that, nobody intended to do it, is you're building up problems that become insuperable. You know, superphosphate, we put ours on in 1953 on our fields. By 1954 we had every rabbit for 100 miles on our fields because of the phosphate content of the forage. Because animals don't thrive without phosphate in the forage. So nobody put it on then until everybody went for rabbits, because to put on superphosphate was to get eaten out by rabbits. But by 1955, due partly to my own, I was a researcher in CSIRO, we'd beaten the rabbit, so we could put on superphosphate, and from then on they never stopped putting it on until today, and this is 1995, so we have 200 years of superphosphate in most of the soils, and we have extraordinarily heavy cadmium loads in all the products. So, but nobody intended the cadmium. There was no evil intent. So, to quote myself, evil turns out to be rigorously applied stupidity.
Any chance we could adapt?
The intention is not to be evil. Okay. Oh, shit, Bill.
Turns out to be?
Rigorously applied stupidity. Nobody intended evil. I mean, I grew up and had the same experience as everybody my age. You know, I felled trees for a living. I put on superphosphate. When I got 2,4,5-T out to kill blackberries, I thought my world was made, you know. It's only later and in retrospect you can see where that eventually leads you. Broadly speaking, biocides affect us as much as anything else. So it's smart to be organic, it's clever, it's sustainable, and it's you know, benefit. You're not hurting anybody. And after all, it's a long time ago since Silent Spring was written. When was it written? In the 50s. And it was spot on. But we need to rewrite it, because we have closed down our major river systems, the Darling, Murray. It's like closing down the Mississippi. And we've closed it down because we're growing blue-green algae, of which not only algae but its metabolites are very poisonous. Cattle can't drink it, people can't drink it. That means we've closed down 35 towns along those rivers, purely on the basis of the escape of fertilisers to the water. And that's not the fault entirely of the farmers. 30% of that come in from the sewage lines, 60% from farms, most from cotton. So you can close down your country if you continue this sort of stupidity long enough. And Russia, when I got there, when it was the USSR 6 or 7 years ago, it was about 88. There were 700 academicians we met in Kiev, in Kursk. They said, we are terribly worried. None of our major rivers has drinkable water in. We were forced by this pressure from Stalin and Khrushchev to overproduce wheat. We made bigger and bigger tractors, put more and more fertiliser on. We no longer can produce wheat in Ukraine. It's finished. It's totally compacted, and we don't know how to uncompact it. And all that nitrate we put on the Ukraine is in the rivers. But we have no alternative but to drink it. Therefore, they expect, rising rates of cancer, till it gets like America, where cancer is actually epidemic. Because when you're drinking nitrosamines, you're drinking cancer. Add chlorine to that, and you've got the cancer map.
Is there any point when this whole thing can collapse, this industrialized agriculture?
It already has collapsed. You can go to Ames, Iowa, and ask the agricultural faculty. They'll say, yes, we were guilty, we're sorry, it's collapsed. They had a nice day from 1940 till today, but it's incredible what they did, and they never measured it. So it has collapsed. But it's collapsed everything else with it, and this is the sad thing. Of course they're still doing it because, the only way you can find out is either make direct measurements yourselves or, get your data somewhere that you can get it.
Death rates?
But a lot of the world's turned around. All of Southeast Asia is about around. No more fertilisers, no more pesticides, no more biocides. Indonesia went. Iceland's gone. Anywhere you can get to a parliament which is reasonable, it's gone. Zimbabwe's gone, a lot of Southern Africa's gone. So the markets are closed. Most of India's gone. India had the Green Revolution. So India really hates, artificials and biocides. There's nothing alive anymore in the paddy fields. So there's no disease control mechanisms. Indonesia did a great thing to persuade its farmers. It planted the little rices and it put the plastic bags over each 10 or 20 sets in the farmers' fields, and it didn't do anything else for some of them. And of course the rice got eaten by the brown leafhopper. But in some of the other ones, it put one spider, and you can't find a lease offer sometimes, so that was it. As far as the farmers were concerned, if they can't see spiders and frogs and lizards in their fields, they're not going to use biocides. Because the pest problem, the brown leaf hopper problem in rice is insoluble. It's very like the red spider mite problem in apples and things. It's literally insoluble. It starts with spraying and it never ends. So all apples are soaked in poison, sad to say. They're all red spider mite. And the soybeans onto now 36 different sprays to get a crop of soybean through. Each one different, because essentially every week they've got to change the spray, because your pests are resistant to 25 of them or something, and you've got to hit those with something different. So all your soybeans are grown in Mexico, Obregon, north and south, down to Navajo, and Every chemical company in the world has large warehouses there. So your soybeans is become a deadly crop because a lot of those sprays are systemic sprays. They're in the bean. And the only reason we're growing soybeans is to paint cars. They're not grown for food. I suppose maybe 1% of the crop is eaten by people, but it's the same crop. The rest of it is simply oils expressed. It's the only basis for car paint. So you can imagine how many soybeans you need. Otherwise, only cars you can get are the natural colours of the metal. So you want a red car or black car, you've got to grow an acre of soybeans, you know.
And newspaper.
Yes. Yeah. Well, soybeans are subject to a tremendous amount of investigation as to its products. You can make anything you like out of soybeans. I was talking to a businessman going down when I last went to Mexico, sitting beside me. He said, in a few years, we'll be able to make everything out of soybeans. He said, you know, you'll think you're eating eggs or meat or something, it'll all be soybeans. So, and I said, why do we want that? What do you see wrong with meat and eggs? He said, he said, I won't be eating it, but you will. You, the people, will. and I said, well, that's nice of you, you know. But what is behind that is the soybean is the only crop in the world in which 100% of the patents are owned. There is no free seed anymore in soybeans. So that's it. It's sort of 90% of wheat, 100% of soybeans, 80% of barleys and things are owned by only 5 chemical companies. So the soybean is the first crop to go out of human possibilities. It's no longer possible for you to consider as a food. But the others are going fast. The 46 main crops are being patented as we speak. And that means that they'll all be produced under contract with heavy biocides, so you can kiss your ass goodbye, really. If you want to see how soybeans are, just take a trip to Mexico. It's not far away. You'll be there in a day and a half driving. Head for Obregon. That's soybeans north and south. You look at it, there's no living thing there. There's not a bird, a lizard, an insect. It's salted for miles. The soil's in total collapse. If you want to see the process of soil collapse, you will see it there. You know, you've got this sick crop, you know, fed to sick people for hundreds of miles, and it's destroying Mexico. And that is very sad. That crop will destroy Mexico. You won't notice it, but after you get past Hermosillo, Mexico's already destroyed. That was soybean 5 years ago. And as you go down south, there's still some living soybean fields, but very little. And salt is eaten everywhere it was. And soybeans remove more forest than all of the wood chipping combined. As I say to you, you should go and see it. So just drop into Guaymas and have a look at your health food production, and then go on down to Obregon and do it. Otherwise you don't have this sense of anger, and you don't have a real sense of what catastrophe is. You don't know what you're talking about till you go and stand on it. Ask the civil engineers. They can't lay sewer pipes anymore. They can't put pipes in. They said there was salt 60 metres down, now it's 1 metre down. Said, we can do nothing. You can't put foundations of buildings in, nothing.
What does it do with construction?
Well, when you've got solcrete, it eats all the pipes, including the plastic ones. And it tips your buildings over. It's nice, and salt is rather like ice. It flows in great uplift systems. You've got 60 metres of solid salt. And that has eaten all the Yaqui Indians. The salt has swept down and wiped them out, right to the coast. So it's got rid of the Yaqui and the Mayo, who are forest Indians. And you know, there's a little clump of mayo left, a little jungle in this wilderness. You know, it's so sad. So don't listen to me raving on, say must be mad or a liar. Go down there, have a look at disaster, and think of what you're doing, you know. Don't imagine you're not part of it. Your car's painted, you're getting soybeans, you're the ones eating soy, you're the ones bringing soybeans up to some cult, you know. It's true. If you want to look at real wreckage, go and look at where they've been looking for crystals to sell in America. You know, disaster. Unreconstructed diggings for miles. I mean, your appetites are so unnecessary. What was I going to talk about? Home garden. It's the only way out, I tell you. You haven't got a home garden, you're dead. Okay, so you've got to straight. Now, let me get this through to you. This is a serious affair. Well, we're involved in a serious business. You've got to be serious about it. You've got to take it seriously. You've got to be indomitable, and what's the word you used? You've no fucking compromises. Right? Oh, no. You don't compromise. You say what the truth is and let people make the decisions, but you don't let them get away with shit. Right? So you're in a fight for your life, and that's all there is to it. You've lost it, but, you know, here we are in the last days. If you stand in one place, here's your little feet here, and sort of lean out a little bit. You walk there from a path, right, and reach around you like that, and that's your garden. You cover 12 square metres. So where you can reach from standing in one place is 12 square metres. Works out about the same every time. Maybe if you're small, you need 2 of them. Well, why don't you put another one opposite that one? That being your path. Now those gardens are the least path for the greatest production bed. If you can get path down less than that, let us know. The other thing about this is about 6 feet across, maybe a little larger. So a single sprinkler can cover all of that. So you can water the whole garden from that point. If you don't have a sprinkler, you can hand water it by hose easily, and if you don't have that, you have to sink unglazed earthenware pots in it and keep them full of water. So you fill those with water, put a little flat stone on top, and refill them every 4 or 5 days. And that is the most economical way to water a garden, if you're really up against it, you know. You take all your gargling water and everything out and put it in those little pots, and it weeps out and grows an area about 3 feet across. So it'll water these on its own. Now you paper that all over with newspaper because we're in America. If we're in India, we do it with banana leaves. And you throw straw on top, which we do everywhere around the world because we go and cut it. And you plant it with a bucket of soil, which you got from a nice place, so it's nice soil. You scraped it up on the forest floor or dug it out of a pigsty or something. And you make 3 or 4 things on here. There's your straw, or your dry banana leaf, whatever. There's your newspaper, overlapped, so there's never any more weeds. And here's your planting things. One is lens, about 3 inches thick in the middle. of good soil, and on that you sprinkle fine seeds. So that's your patch of carrots or radishes or something.
How big is that? 3 inches?
Thick in the middle, about 15 inches across. So you make as many little patches of fine seeds as you like, you know. And then another one is you push your hand out and force a little hole open and leave a handful of soil in it. And in that you plant your seedlings and your large seeds like beans. Right. Now for root crops and things, you put them down on top of the newspaper, but you stick a spike down and punch a hole in the newspaper, then you put your potatoes down the bottom there, and your Jerusalem artichokes and your tubers.
How thick is the newspaper?
Pardon?
How thick is the newspaper?
That's about 4 or 5 leaves thick.
Sorry.
You know, New York Times gives you several square metres. It weighs 12 pounds and you use 4 pages thick, and you wet it down. You never repeat the newspaper bit. Then a good idea is to newspaper your little standing spot and put sawdust, thick sawdust on top. Now, so the garden is weed-free. You haven't put a lot of effort in. If you had your bucket of soil ready and your about 3.5 to 4 bales of straw and your seeds and tubers and that, from go to woe is 40 minutes. Done it hundreds of times. And if you're going on a plan, you know, you plant it in spring, that's your next 6 months dealt with, and you plant again late summer to early autumn. So you do it twice a year, you plant it.
Should you throw some worms in there too?
No, you don't have to put any worms in. If there's a worm within 5 miles, you get it. It's like most things, you don't actually have to cart them there. You have to make a place for them to be if they get there. And the worms get there. I think worms love New York Times best of all, although Dr. Zeus, wow. I used Dr. Zeus once and they were there within hours, you know.
How thick do you put the straw on top of the newspaper?
You know, it doesn't much matter, 9 or 12 inches. If you want to really kick it in, you can use lucerne hay, which is expensive, right? It costs you $30 to do that with lucerne hay. And that is very high protein, and your garden is immensely successful. Yeah, lucerne, yeah, alfalfa. But mostly you can't do that. So you maybe put a book or 2 of alfalfa around the bottom and just put ordinary old straw on. So you've done it and planted it, and out you hop. And then if you're going to forget to water it, invest $60 in an automatic single outlet watering machine and tell it to water it every night, and just go out and pick it after that. So we put about 12 of these a day in Aboriginal backyards. That's with lots of cups of tea and laughing and dirty jokes and everything. So we set them up for 6 months, fresh food with that. That doesn't matter if that's on concrete. So if it's on concrete, put 3 or 4 inches more hay. It doesn't worry the carrots or anything else. Let's come down and go down full length in the hay. So, and if these are good things, those. So if you have people in wheelchairs, we give them 2 of these, so you can come down the wheelchair and attend your garden. And just do the same. You put the newspaper on here, and then you loosen hay, and then 2 bricks or 3 bricks, and then fill it up with hay, and just hand them their seeds in their bucket of soil, and away they go. But old people in wheelchairs say 2 tables produce too much food for them, so they say really 1 table is plenty.
Now, are you tilling any of the soil underneath this at all?
No.
You just lay it right out?
We didn't do any heavy work, and if we don't plant weeds, we never get weeds either. So there's no weeding and no tilling, no digging, and And the crops and the worms together work it down to soil in 3 years. So you've got to do a remulch. I spend 40 minutes every 3 years to supply yourself with food. Gardening, end of gardening. Although that sounds a bit careless, it's the result of an awful lot of trial and work to get that recipe right. For the function of the elements in the organic world. It's not coded for the function of the elements in the chemical world in the sense of inorganic chemistry. It's coded for their function in organic systems. Many of them, for instance, we think we can put on superphosphate, and we can and get away with it a bit. But there are two reasons why in the end we can't keep on. The first is that all of that carries its own pollutants. The two very common ones are cadmium and uranium. So as you add superphosphate annually, so cadmium uptake increases in your plants to the point where many market gardens who are inorganic, the cadmium in it is way beyond health levels, and that goes for most of the vegetables you're buying. The cadmium levels are way beyond that, and that is a deadly poison, and it's an extraordinarily painful death. It's a screaming death. So constant application of superphosphate to food systems will kill you in the long run. The second about the uranium, it is radioactive, and it builds up annually and remains in your soils, and it's another poisonous material. So although the benefits of phosphate are high on phosphate-lacking soils, the benefits of annual applications are zero. It actually becomes extremely detrimental. Now, most of American and modern Australian and European agriculture has reached those levels of pollution because there's no clean phosphate sources. There's no sources of phosphate which are just phosphate. It's always accompanied by... But the other thing that happens is phosphate blocks zinc uptake in plants and animals. Now, zinc at first may sound pretty slight to you. Look at zinc closely. Zinc is the coenzyme for almost all your food processing systems. So you can eat your head off, but you can't absorb your food without zinc. The other effect you might notice is wound healing slow or none, and sexual development is not. You don't develop testes, ovaries, penises, all that. So zinc is very important to the expression of sexuality, to the digestion of food, the absorption of your amino acids. It's a coenzyme with most of our enzymatic processes in our bodies. 25 milligrams. And you're lucky to get 8 milligrams a day from crops grown on superphosphate. So at the same time that superphosphate's adding cadmium, it's decreasing zinc. And the other thing it will do eventually is cause elevated copper levels in your blood. So if you have ultra-high copper levels, you're copper poisoned. It's because you're taking up that double plus ion in the absence of zinc. So it's indication much of the world's population now has high blood copper levels.
Permaculture, restore the land. Permaculture, restore the land. Well, I got me a mulch garden, so the land it would not.
But you've got to read the whole manual to get it out. I've got the pages which are important for you. Would you like to see them? Yeah. There's something unique sitting in that manual. I often wonder whether to chuck it out or not, but I've left it in. It's the centrepiece, which has centrepiece of colour pages, has the periodic table on it, and it's heavily coated.
Excellent. Hey.
It's coated